Welcome to Voices Beyond the Spectrum. Real stories, brave voices, radiant perspectives. This is the podcast for parents and caregivers of autistic and neurodivergent children and teens. I'm your host, and each week we hold space for honest conversations, shared struggles, and hard-won victories from those who truly live it. You're not alone, your story matters, and it starts here. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Voices Beyond the Spectrum. I'm your host, Karla Chinen, and today we'll be discussing inclusion in the school settings as well as in the community. And to kind of shine light on that, we have our special guest, KJ Johnson. Hi, KJ. Welcome.
What's
If
going on?
if you could please just give us a little bit of insight into your life, your family's life, as well as your child's life and the journey you've had to go through.
So pretty much the dynamic of the family. Of course, I'm married. Three boys, ages, let's see, the little one is 6 and then 9, and then our big boy that we're speaking about today he'll be 16 this year.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
So that's a lot of knowledge to bring to our families,
Ooh,
for
Hammer,
sure.
I hope they're ready.
So I know it's a very sensitive subject, but what was your perspective when you received that diagnosis with your wife?
All right, so the nitty-gritty, right? So my wife is not his biological mother.
Mhm.
And it kind of answered the question. When I heard the diagnosis, I didn't really know what to expect, so I didn't really know how to react. Um, my partner at the time, I'm not quite sure how she took it, but eventually that led to her kind of parting ways with us. And so that's when I met my beautiful wife for over 12 years now, and she has fulfilled that role that I needed as a partner for my son.
Oh, that's amazing. And what challenges early on did you have with your son? Basically learning more about what came with that diagnosis. And if you can kind of, if you find it okay to kind of explain the diagnosis, because this podcast is for different parents with different children with different diagnoses.
Most definitely. So his name is Christian, my soon to be 16-year-old. He has Down syndrome.
Okay.
So to start early off, I had my son when I was, what, 24, 25. Him being diagnosed, like I said, at that time I had no idea what to expect. I didn't know. And I guess as a mainstream kid, all we really knew about kids with mental disabilities are the kids who rode the short yellow bus. So that's about the amount of ignorance as we had going into it. So just I don't know. I don't think I approached it any differently, except for when we went to doctor's appointments to actually know what was going on. I think we just went head on as if he was any other kid growing up, and just like any parenting book, there isn't one. So you gotta just roll with it. So honestly, I think that's where that went up until I don't know, from him being born to until we got into preschool.
Okay. And then in your journey with school, going into the topic of inclusion, what did you perceive school was going to be like for him? And what was your reality? And what did you have to do to make it accommodating for him?
Mm. I mean, so, and I probably sound like a broken record, but I keep saying this because, people with, children in the neurodivergent spectrum, when they have the kids at first and they get these diagnoses, it's frightening. It's
Mhm.
scary. We don't know what to think. And so him going into school, like I said, I didn't know, but don't know, so him first getting in there, I guess, just kind of seeing where it goes from there. Um, And then then that's kind of where it got rocky at that point because at that point you start noticing that your kid is different, especially with Down syndrome. He looks different, because he has the slanted eyes, and sometimes the speech is not all the way is not there. And my son wasn't verbal when he first entered school. And so we had to learn, some bits and pieces of sign language to get his, needs met and to kind of be able to communicate with him. But that's where it got rocky. Actually, getting that light bulb turned on that now your child is different from everybody else.
Definitely. Okay. And once you we start building this knowledge, as we're going through
Yeah.
the years with our kiddos as to what they really need or how
Mm,
they're not receiving everything that they should and they're entitled to per se.
yeah.
Uh, when was that switch for you where you started now saying, hey, he does have Down syndrome, but I want him to be part of this community. I want him to be, a part of this. When was that switch for you?
I think it became like kindergarten and first grade,
Hmm.
when they started hitting those big school gates.
Yes,
Now was learning because at that point, and for those who are watching who don't know, at that point you've already been connected to, the regional center.
hmm.
Hopefully, if not, then you should be.
Yes,
You're also talking to the school counselor, school psychologists, because they're making their own diagnosis as well to kind of see. It's a collaborative effort once you get into school.
exactly.
Um, but we've all been to school ourselves already, so we know what's supposed to be there. And
Yes,
so being able to ask questions, because at first when you have mainstream kids, you send them off to school, that they go to all different subjects, they know what's going on, you just send them off. But it requires a little more um, inclusion, as you say, on our behalf, with their education. And it's their involvement altogether because you have to see what they're getting based off of what your kid cannot do. Is he walking? Is he jumping? Is he talking? Can he write? Can he not write? Can he feed himself? Can he not feed himself? All these things you have to take into consideration because you have to find out if, number one, that school offers all this stuff. And if you don't, how far do you have to drive to get these services for your baby? you
exactly.
know? And so that was the beginning of school for Christian, is kind of seeing what school had what and to what extent they had it.
And to you, what when you hear the word inclusion, what does that mean to you?
Pretty much, in a nutshell, what is my son going to be involved in that everyone else is involved in as well? How do you make my son feel like he's like everybody else? And so, um, partly, like, let's say recess, for example. You know what I'm saying? How is my son being included into mainstream recess
Hmm.
and not necessarily being separated
Hmm.
or secluded because he's different and can't do certain things?
Definitely. Yeah, and I think that's our fear, sending our babies. And um, if I may ask, is your child verbal?
He's I say about 70% verbal. The longer I always tell people who are around him, the longer you're with him, the more you understand him.
Okay.
But throughout the years, he's become a lot more clearer in his language. So it's improving. I'm just hoping by the time he hits 21, 25, we'll be having full blown conversations.
Yes, definitely. So, but I take it in the beginning, he had to work to get there.
Hmm.
So as parents, we're like putting them in that school and you don't know what's really happening in there, with our babies.
So
And like you said, it's a lot about advocating for them, making sure that they're in the right place. They're not being secluded. They're not being put aside because you know, teachers and staff might think they're not capable enough of doing, what we as parents, we know our kids, especially, I don't know about your son, but my son, my daughter, you have to really get to know them for them to really want to do anything for you.
exactly, no, for real, no, exactly. I
you know?
understand.
So and then with that being said, going into the community, what have you done on your part to make sure that your son gets the full experience? Especially now that he's a 16-year-old boy, soon to be a man. you
Oh
know.
man, I've I've done everything and everything. I mean, so kind of go back to school and kind of work my way up. School number one. So the inclusion is not only about our babies; it's about us too. Because back in the day when we grew up in school, our parents could just pop up on us in the classroom and we not know. That's not the case now. You got to be checked in. IDs got to be checked. They got locked school grounds, and so advocating for yourself. Like, look, my baby is has special circumstances. I need access to my kid,
Mhm.
and not taking that first no as that's it, because that's not it. Let them know that you're not the parent to be messed with, because I am concerned about number one what you're doing with my kid, and just because I know my kid requires special attention, and so I need to make sure that you're okay as well as my kid. So this needs to be a collaborative effort. So I need to have access to my kid, and that includes the IEP meetings. That includes hey, nothing's wrong, but I need to go in the classroom and make sure everything is okay. Because with my son being a teenager now, before he went to high school, I would pop in on the classroom. My son had his head down because he was sleeping. Right. And so I
Yeah.
come in and like, Christian, look who's here. And my son pops up. Because he knows,
Mm-hmm.
outside of having Down syndrome, he's a teenager, so he knows as long as daddy's not there, he might be able to get away with a couple of things. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I make sure that I'm included in those activities, and so we've been involved with Special Olympics. We've been involved with it's like I said, you have to call because kids who are mainstream when they're in school, people will advocate for them automatically. Hey, you got the baseball flyers and stuff like that. But none of those flyers have anything for our babies on it. What about our autistic babies? What about, our kids who need a little extra help? What can they do? So I contacted everybody, my wife, my mom. We called teachers I've tag team with. They've helped, get resources. The regional center helped get resources. And my son has been in baseball since age 5. We do soccer, we do bowling, he's in a dance academy. We tried Taekwondo. He wasn't feeling that though, too much running and that was hilarious.
Uh,
That was too much for
yeah.
him. But no, we do some of everything. We actually just went to an event in downtown Ontario. He's a big
Mhm.
Bruno Mars fan.
Oh,
He knows
nice.
every single song, every single word. And they had a 24 karat Bruno Mars dedication band. So they performed as if they were Bruno Mars.
Oh,
And it
nice.
was amazing. And he partied his butt off. But
Uh,
we have to do
love it.
the work. It takes a little more effort on our behalf to make sure that they get everything that they need.
I know when my husband did the support group last Tuesday and he met
Mm,
you. Like I'm not gonna lie to you, like he came out with like his eyes watery. He's like, I needed this. He's like, thank you.
mm,
Because it's so hard, especially with men,
mm.
for to get men like for us mommies to get men on that, like, let's do this, let's do this, let's do that,
Yeah.
and to see another father that's as engaged, it's beautiful to see, to be honest with you. It gives it gives me joy, to know that there's more men out there willing to put in the work. Because you said it's not easy, and you do have to put that, extra effort into all this,
Mm.
and not just honestly for the kids in the long run, for you as, fathers. Like I remember
Yeah.
having a very transparent conversation with my husband and saying, hey,
Hmm.
you need to connect with him. I know he's not like your nephew that plays basketball and knows stats from football. But if you open up to him and you let him show you what he's into, he will
Hmm.
bring you into that world with him. Because
Yeah.
I'm sorry, if in a few years he goes into teenage years and he doesn't want to connect with you, I'm not going to force that relationship on him because you did
Definitely.
not make that effort. You are the
Definitely.
adult, you're the father. You make
Definitely.
that step, and honestly, they're like, peanut butter and jelly now. We go
That's
everywhere together,
good.
you
That's
know, and
good.
it's beautiful, like I said, to see another man that really takes on that role of being that role model for their son, you know, and teaching them how to be men. Because
Yeah.
regardless of the diagnosis, they're still teenagers. They're still eventually going to grow up to be men, you
Yeah.
know, and they see from example, not from what's being said to them,
Well,
you
most
know.
definitely.
So it's great. Thank you. I'm like,
No
oh,
problem.
teary eye
Yeah.
too.
It's funny you said that about, your kids and your husband because, you know, when his bio mother decided to kind of step back, it took me years to share his responsibility with my wife. And I'm talking about we next year we married 10 years, together 12. It took me almost halfway through our marriage to trust my wife with his needs because I'm like, this is mine, And I've offered, because I know his parents have gone through this where probably, on the flip, the dad bailed because the kid, had the autistic diagnosis or Down syndrome, so they bailed out because they didn't know what it was and it was scary. And this is real life. This is for gangsters. This life of neuro.
Yes.
This is for OGs right here. This is
Amen
not for
to that.
this is definitely not for the faint of heart. And
Mm-mm.
I've offered her the opportunity to come in, but here he's older now. It doesn't require that much engagement. Just come have some fun with him. And she decided to. We accepted her knowing her place away. And so when she does come in and trickle in whenever she decides, we know what it's worth. So we've been okay with that. And now he calls my wife mom. Sometimes likes to be with her more than me. That hurts my feelings sometimes. Because of all the work I put in all these years. But
Yeah.
but that's what I work for my
Hmm.
family. You know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? For a family to where he feels no different than anybody else.
Amen to that. No, we were actually just talking about that, my husband and I. Because until my son was like, let's say 4 or 5, that's when I had that, raw discussion with my husband. I'm like, you need to put effort, man. You sitting there looking at him do his thing ain't gonna be it. You have to engage, you have to partake, you have to, you know, I can't trust you fully for a day with him when I know
For real.
he's gonna be sitting there by himself, literally, and
Yeah.
you're gonna be on the other end of the couch, and you guys are just gonna be staring at each other for 8 hours. Like, that's not how it works,
Yeah.
And when you said, once I started seeing that connection, I started like stepping away because I knew as a woman, he needed a man to take
Hmm.
over and to show him how to be a man. So I
Yeah.
started to move away, and I was like that. He was a mama's boy, like hug me, kiss me. Now I'm like, did you miss me? No, not really. And then he goes and he's like, Dad, and then he goes and hugs Dad, and I'm like, ah. I know it's like it hurts me, but it feels good at the same time because I know that if, I think we always have that thought if we're no longer in the picture, he's not
Yeah.
gonna feel so alone, because he was
Right.
able to connect with another person like that.
Exactly.
So I know I know it hurts a little, but it feels good at the same time that you
Well, it's
have
like, okay. But
backup.
I don't have to take this. I'm going downstairs.
I
You
know.
know?
I'm like, I'm going to go with my daughter somewhere. Bye. We're
Exactly,
gonna go get
right?
our nails done,
Agreed.
but so going back to the topic at hand. So when have you ever experienced a moment where you felt your child wasn't being included or like you just entered an environment, you're like, oh my goodness, what's going on here? Like, this is not it. Like, I
Most
either
most
have to
most
change
definitely.
it. What, tell me that one moment that was like, that still sticks with you.
Oh, God have mercy. So let's see. So my son went to Golden Elementary in the Etiwana School District in Rancho, the most fantastic elementary school for kids with disabilities. Fantastic. They have a buddy program to where kids are linked up with your kid. They help. They play with them. Fantastic. Best program. Um, but then he went to junior high.
Don't mention the school. Just for legality issues, don't mention the
Oh,
school,
for
Max.
Leggett. Oh, okay. I
No,
wanted to,
the other
I wanted to give them their props.
Oh,
But then,
oh,
I won't mention this one though.
yeah. When the negative experience, don't mention the name, please.
I got you. I got you.
Thank you.
So then he went to junior high.
Hmm.
And this one was, I'm like, what is going on here? Like, so we went from elementary school, and my son was writing sentences.
Hmm.
He learned how to write his name. He was starting to learn his address. And then all of a sudden, stopped. He started coming home with coloring pages and going back. Even his sight words had improved in elementary. Like he was reading because, continued, you know. Then it went back to dad, sad, mad, glad. I'm like, hold on, how do we go backwards? And so we moved. We moved to where we are now, and then we went back to elementary school because of the way the district works. We went back to junior high school, and then the nightmare continued. So his whole, pretty much how I explained it in his high school IEP, his whole junior high was a waste of time. He totally regressed. Wasn't doing what he was in elementary school. Like he was doing more in fourth grade than he was in seventh grade. Right. So I have very heated. My kids call me. We're big Marvel fans in here, and they call me Thanos, Daddy Thanos. Because of I'm very very protective,
Hmm.
and I'm a very nice guy. You see me smiling and engaging, and having a good time. But when it comes to my family, especially Christian, it's a part of me that my wife has to pull me back.
As
And
she should.
um, so I was like, just what is this? And the principal was like, well, this is the program. I mean, it doesn't make sense because this program is one hat fits all. But you have kids with various levels of disabilities who are being taught the exact same. It doesn't work. And why is my son coming home with scribbles of coloring pages? Where's the work at? And so those are the battles that we start to fight as we progress through school. Which teachers are just doing it because they have a cookie cutter game plan for our kids with disabilities, and who are actually trying to make sure that our kids, when they progress to the next level, are productive or are getting out of being nonverbal or who are getting out of not being able to write or read or know their letters, know the alphabet, know how to count. Because there's a set of teachers, one that are helping our kids grow up, and the ones who are keeping our kids stuck where they are. And so, whew, have mercy. I think I cried enough in my ninth grade IEP. I don't have any tears left right now. But so blessed in the high school program he's in now, because now he's actually back to doing work, back to writing, back to doing math. On top of the outings that our kids do to know what the real world looks like. And yeah, that was my battle for inclusiveness for
Oh
Christian,
my.
mostly in school.
Oh my goodness. Well, I I know what that feels like. I mean, I know what that feels like. I'm that mom for my school district, and they know me very well there. Let's just
And
say.
all of this is. I think that the one mistake that we make in our community is that we raise our kids based off of their diagnoses, and we forget that they're still kids. We forget that they say kids absorb all this information when they're young because it's like a sponge. Same thing goes for them when they're young, whether they can say it, repeat it or not. They're still learning this stuff. They're still seeing the stuff.
Exactly.
When they're dancing, they want to dance too. Even if they are immobile, they might want to bop their shoulders instead. It might be a different way they communicate whatever reaction they have in their own way, but we still have to take it that they're still learning the stuff. We let the labels stop how we engage and teach our own kids with disabilities. And that was that. I'm telling you, Carla, I'm telling you, I've seen other parents, and it brings me to tears. how you treat your own kid with disability reflects when you put them in public.
I know. Yeah, I've seen it. You can see the difference. Um, I work for a district. and
Mm,
and and you could clearly see the parents that advocate in that IEP and the parents that
mm,
don't. It's a great district, and not because I work there, but it is. And it's actually
yeah.
the district that my kids attend school at too.
Well,
So
okay.
it's a lot of intertwining situations there. But with that being said, I feel like it really is our job as parents not only to not go to that IEP ready to like fight and argue with staff because that gets you honestly nowhere and you're just labeled, but it does take a lot of strategic advocating,
Right.
educating yourself on your rights,
Mm,
not asking for a la carte of what everyone gets, but literally focusing on your child's strengths and also
mm,
keeping records of, I'm pretty sure you've done this, kept records and taken those records to those IEPs of what their work looks like when
mm-hmm.
he works with you, as opposed to when he works with, other people or other staff. Like I
Yeah.
remember being in one of the IEPs and they were talking about body parts because at that point I think he was in first or second grade
Uh,
and they're like, look, he doesn't know how to draw eyes, nose, mouth, because at that time he was fixated with statues of liberties
okay.
and monuments. So, and I had brought pictures and work samples and obviously a lot of very detailed statues of liberties with plenty of eyes and plenty of nose,
Mm,
and I was like, no, ma'am, look at what hand's holding the torch. You're seeing the perspective of the back.
mm-hmm.
He drew the perspective of the back of the Statue of Liberty. They were cracking up. I'm like, he obviously knows where his eyes, nose, and mouth are. Look at
Right.
this one,
Right.
you know? So it's a lot of doing that. It's a lot of doing our homework. And you said, like, a lot of the times I feel that's where the community fails, not educating ourselves into really what is our children are entitled to, but on
Mm-hmm.
top of that, limiting the potential of our own kids based on
Yeah.
that diagnosis, and believing what people tell you,
That
you
part.
know. So like I went to a occupational therapist, my first
Mm,
meeting with that guy. And I was like, "Okay, can you tell me how I'm gonna potty train?" My son was like 2. He's
mm,
like, "Ma'am, just so you know, your son will never be potty trained." Kind of get that. I've seen 20 grown men not
mm.
potty trained. I left that day like in tears. I was like, what the heck? And this is supposed to be the specialist that's going to help him. I lasted there that one day. I switched clinics real quick.
Oh, have mercy.
Like you meet people like that, and you got to know when you got to move settings and you got to put your child in a more positive environment where they actually do believe in your child and see
Right.
the potential, you know?
Nope, I agree.
So, I mean, it my husband mentioned that you do sports with kiddos. Did you start your own league with the kids, or how does that look for your son when you take him to sports and have him do the inclusive nature of that?
Well, lucky for him. When we started baseball, there was always a need for an assistant coach, and because all the dads would either drop off and leave, or they'd be in the stands stuck on the phones, I was always the one to volunteer. So I've been assistant coach to every sport for all of my kids, from last time I can remember. So I'm always on the field with Christian. Now that he's 15, I'm like, bro, can I go sit down there? Like I've been doing this for a long time. Like, can I go on the stands and go sit on my phone and play, King's Kingdom or something or Candy Crush, you know? But I always find myself going back out to the field because the other babies out there need somebody too. They need somebody to talk to. I think I told your husband, the team that he's on now, there's one kid who's hyperverbal. He talks a lot, but he's so energetic, and
Mm.
I'm talking to him. You know what I'm saying? I'm putting him next to my son. Here, y'all two, y'all bad after each other. Even ones that, who aren't verbal. I'm like, here, come on. You want this? Yes. Are you all done? I'm sharing what I know with them, and that gets them excited. I'm the village father. Always have been. So if someone's not willing to do it, or they're embarrassed, or I don't know, whatever the case they may be, I'm there
That's awesome.
because our babies need us.
That's amazing, and it's a really good perspective to take, especially like I mentioned, like with men, you don't find that very often, you know. Um, and then as far as your other kids, how do you see your son's diagnosis and in the relationship alongside with your other children, and how you have to orchestrate the relationship between them so it's harmonious?
Um, it's been work, but it's also been successful too. I raised my boys, even though he's big brother, I raised them in the protective capacity for Christian. So like, say they go to the park, of course, my younger boys are gonna find friends quickly and my son's gonna be roaming around. But there's always a couple of kids who are willing to go play with Christian, and my boys know that if he's trying his name is he can speak, like he can speak a lot clearer now, but back in the day, if they wanted to know what his name was, my kids would help. Or someone was being mean to him, my boys are jumping in. But even for their interactions with each other, my youngest one said, he said one day, he's like, when, he said, Dad, when do we get, oh, he said, I wish we had a normal Christian, right? So instead of getting upset and furious and turned into Thanos from Marvel Comics, I took a breath. My son is only 5. I was like, baby, this is normal Christian. And just let them know, by don't ever say anything like that ever again. This is your big brother. And same thing, my middle son, he's done, such a wonderful job, with his big brother, because they grew up first together. And so they're like just meshed perfectly together. He understands what he's saying. He advocates for him. They play together all day long. I mean, they're all best friends. They can be in the house and play together for hours and hours and hours. I just made sure I raised them to know that that's your brother. Period. You protect him. You speak up for him. You guys don't fight. The same thing I do with the other two brothers. Don't fight with each other. You stand up for each other. You protect each other. Yeah, I don't do anything different just because he has the label. Like I say, that's where we mess up at. And you teach the other ones how to deal with, just in case. Like, say, you know, Christian might do something, he shouldn't be doing. That might be tied into his Down syndrome. And it's, he doesn't know, so show him. Or he didn't mean to do that. He doesn't know how strong he is. So just tell him. Don't get upset. That way they know how to work with their own brother if I'm not around. 'Cause I might be upstairs chilling, watching TV, and they been downstairs by themselves. You have to be able to trust your kids with each other, especially with your special baby. And I know he's 15, but he's always my baby, period.
Oh yeah. No,
you
I know.
know?
I know. I definitely do know that. Um, and then with, with when I mean, I love the fact that you did embrace that relationship and you didn't make them feel a certain way. Do you spend specific time, like, do you do all your outings out together as family, or do you devote certain time to certain kiddos, or everything is like, let's do it all together?
Um, kind of all of the above. Like I said, my boys are daddy's boys. One might be more of a mama's boy than the others, but if we're doing something, we're all going. I'm taking all my boys with me.
Yes.
But just like any other set of siblings,
Mhm.
they need time with a specific parent. So I might just say, Christian, come on, me and you go. He's like, no, take my brother. No, they can stay here with their mama. Me and you, let's go. And I do the same thing with all the other ones. I'll take just the baby. I'll take just the middle one. Because me and the middle one, we do. His name is Caleb. He's not the 9 year old, so he does taekwondo, and I joined taekwondo just to let him know that daddy can still, yeah, he still got it, you know. So
Yeah.
sometimes we're off just he and I, having our taekwondo days, and the other two
Hmm.
were at home, with mom chilling. So yeah, I make it time for they have individual daddy time or mom time, and or it's all of us together as a family.
That's really good. And then when Christian was younger, or have you noticed that the fact that you do take him out a lot to different community events, has that helped with certain behaviors that come up with the diagnosis? Or do you think that it's just his natural progression? Because I know a lot of families are a little hesitant sometimes to take their
Mm.
kids out to the community due to the lack of inclusivity at times.
No, I agree. I think this is a very important topic to have too. Christian's very like mild to moderate. So Christian, I never had any issues with his behavior. Um, but it's because we socialize him so much that he's able to engage by himself. Of course, I watch. At the concert yesterday, he met one of his high school buddies out there, which was great. But he wanted to go to the front of the stage where the performance was going. So I was like, I transported him up there, and then I walked away. And then me and my wife kept to watch from a distance, and he was able to enjoy his time by himself. But you have to be able to, you have to teach them that though. You have to teach them it's safe. Dad's back here. I'm watching you, but do you? You have to train them like all of our kids. You have to train them to be independent. I am the father that promotes independence. Do not be all up on me. Don't be crowding me all the time because I need my break too. You know, but you have to teach them that. And even for because I know I've been blessed to have mild diagnosis, but for those who have the more severe, who are difficult, I know hang in there. But you got to take the chance, even if you go to the park when you know no one's there. Take them outside. If they screaming, at least there ain't nobody there. You know what I'm saying? But because we went to the park this this past weekend, and we go to the park with bikes, scooters, skateboards, and whether they use them or not, they're all around the park. And just so happened, the family that was there having a party had kids who were autistic as well. And when you're in the community, you can pick them out. You know automatically.
Yeah.
And so one of the babies was kept taking one of our kids' scooters and bikes. And so the mom would run over. I'm sorry, no, you good. I know. Let them ride. You know what I'm saying? So we gotta support each other. They don't know. They just see a bike and they want to ride.
Yeah,
If
exactly.
I got it, so do you. You know what I'm saying? As long as you're not trying to rip it apart, you good. But they can't be afraid to socialize the kid. You have to take them out, or else they will have a very difficult time as they do get older doing just that.
Exactly. Yeah. Like some people are like, why did you start this? I'm like, I think a lot of the times we as we even experience it within other parents that have special needs kiddos, you know?
Mhm.
Like you said, you understand, you have that empathy because you understand your child is mild to moderate, but it's not
Mhm.
moderate to severe. But you do understand that there's those kids that are moderate to severe.
Mhm.
And every parent has a different journey. Like we're on the more moderate to severe with Adrian, and with
Mhm.
my daughter it's level 1 autism, and she's
Mhm.
gifted. So if anything, like I could have 4 of her and still be sane. I
Right.
can only
Right.
literally have 1 of Adrian because then I'll go insane if I have any
I
more,
get it. I
you
get it.
know. So with that being said, it's beautiful to hear that you acknowledge that, because I feel like, I mean, it's bad enough we have to advocate at school, we have to advocate at the doctors for services, to on top of that have to like advocate within our own community of parents, and
Yeah.
kind of like shit, like compare struggles. I'm like, no, we're not here to compare struggles. Like it has nothing to do with that. Just show me support and I'll show it back to you. That's all we want.
Yeah.
Show me empathy and it'll be reciprocated. But
Yeah.
it's very true, and it's and like you said, we spot them when we're in a park, we know already, oh, okay, we're good here. There's other
Mm-hmm.
ones around, so it's great. And to kind of like close it off, what are some tips you would give our parents to, like, if you could go back and give yourself a tip when you first
Mm-hmm.
got that diagnosis, or for
Mm-hmm.
new starting parents in this journey, what kind of tips would you give them?
Let's see. I'm not gonna cry, I promise I'm not. Um, One tip would be treat them like every other kid. Second tip, be ready to fight. I'm not talking about physical. I'm talking about mentally. I'm talking verbally. I'm talking be ready to fight. Three, don't be surprised if your kid isn't included. Because sometimes it just might not happen. I've watched plenty of kids who didn't want to play, who just ran circles around my son, no matter how many times he tried to flag him down, and just did not want to play with my son. Cried myself for an hour. Um, and last one, you have to be your child's best advocate. They are going to be who they become because of you. Period.
Well, you might not cry, but I might cry. uh, thank you. Thank you, KJ. It was wonderful to speak to you and, get
Thank you.
another man's perspective on, parenting a child that's neurodivergent. And it's
Yeah.
beautiful to see that there's men out there that have that much passion and love for their children, so it was a pleasure to have you
Thank
here
you
in
for
the
having me.
podcast. And then most likely I'll invite you again on another topic at hand.
I'm
But
ready.
but thank you again. And then um that's all, people. Thank you very much for joining us today. And join us again 2 Tuesdays from today for another episode. Thank you again. Have a great one. Bye-bye. Thank you for tuning into Voices Beyond the Spectrum, brought to you by Empathy for Autism California, Inc. A special thanks to our guest, KJ Johnson, for sharing his heartfelt journey as a devoted father to his amazing son with Down syndrome. Podcast music composed by Brad Kalouv, with additional piano by Sophia and Brad Kalouv. If this episode resonated with you, please follow and share. You'll find us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Podbean, and Spotify. This is Voices Beyond the Spectrum, real stories and radiant perspectives. See you next time.